and they're talking about tenants. And I'm like, hey, you've already got it wrong. Like, you haven't listened. These are residents. We're helping people find homes.
Welcome to the Multifamily Mind with Steve Wunch, a podcast dedicated to thought leadership in the multifamily universe. During each episode, we'll explore topics like leadership, diversity, equity, and inclusion, prop tech, or whatever's on the mind of our multifamily expert. We are creating a thought leadership community where ideas are explored and shared in order to bolster multifamily owners, operators, and those who have a heart for the multifamily industry. Welcome to this episode of the Multifamily Mind. I'm Steve Wunch, your host, and I'm pleased to be joined today by a guy that I respect highly in the multifamily space, not just from a leadership perspective, but he's got a breadth of experience in multiple industries, a lot of exciting things to share. Mr. Mike Wolber is joining us. He's an experienced go-to-market leader, a very well-respected industry thought leader. His experience has been largely focused on growing technology companies, but he was fortunate enough to start his career at Nike. So it's an interesting story. We'll maybe hear a little bit about where he came from in that regard. He currently served as the Chief Revenue Officer for Rent Dynamics, which was recently acquired by Entrata in 2023. He is a board member, a podcast host. He has a podcast titled Modern Multifamily, which is a great one to put on your podcast wish list or hit list. And he is a mentor to many emerging leaders in the multifamily industry. So I'm really excited to have you here today to join me with this conversation, Mike.
What an introduction. I know I helped write part of it, but man alive, Steve, thank you for the warm welcome. And really happy to share some time with you today.
Great. I'm glad to have you here too. And I know you're kind of in a state of flux, which is an interesting place to be. I was just there myself not long ago. So we may touch on that a little bit, but in our pre-episode conversations, we sort of talked about the idea of discussing like a go-to-market strategy or how to help a multifamily supplier partner really understand the nuances of multifamily and how things are slow and different in the multifamily space versus what some salespeople might be used to. So why don't you start us off with some initial thoughts around multifamily and go-to-market strategy and some of the successes that you've had?
So last year, 2023, we were all together in Atlanta for NAA. Do you remember walking the floor last year?
Yeah, I do. I sure do.
1,000+ vendors on this floor. And if I was to work my buns off, I could probably name 150, maybe 200. What do you think you could do? Like, how many do you think you could write out if you were to bang out prop tech companies, suppliers of any like shape and size that are in the space?
I could probably outdo you just because I've been in the space for 31 years. Yeah. So, there's a lot of old standards, but there's a ton of, to your point, there's a ton of new prop tech that is hit the radar and they were in full force. I was thinking you were going to say you could probably count on one hand the number of people that you actually connected with because there was so much to see and so many people there. I think we might have passed
go there next.
Oh yeah. We might have passed like 2 ships in the night. I don't know if we ever really fully connected at NAA last year.
We got one compelling high five, and I remember it vividly. But anyways, like the point I think I try to make there is that I think go-to-market in multifamily has changed like significantly in the last decade, which is when I entered the space. I mean, we've seen a 2x number at NAA just in that compressed window of time. So you think exponentially, like this year, we'll probably see another 20% of new companies that have been incorporated are coming for centralization, AI, expense management, resident financial services, et cetera. And I think go-to-market is wildly nuanced in multifamily. And that's like the first thing that I think a lot of people need to just recognize. I think a lot of people bring in talent from Oracle or Intel or Salesforce or these big enterprise companies and assume that playbook is going to rinse and repeat and scale in this space that you know better than I do, Steve. And that's the first big miss, is that it's wildly nuanced. So I think that's like the first thing.
Yep. I think you and I have talked a couple of times just based on it's a relationship based business, and a lot of newcomers to the space just don't understand that a multifamily operator needs to have some kind of relationship with you before you're going to be able to crack that nut. Don't you agree?
100%. I think it's really important that you learn the ecosystem before you try to be part of the ecosystem. And I think examples are, I talk to a lot of early stage companies and they'll ask me to maybe take a pass at their marketing messaging, and they're talking about tenants. And I'm like, hey, you've already got it wrong. Like, you haven't listened. These are residents. We're helping people find homes. Like the emotion level in this space is so high. Almost everything's taken personally. And as such, it is a go a mile deep motion. This is not a go a mile wide motion. Right. Like you typically see work really well in like the enterprise sectors where you're not focused on a specific, vertical or industry, like we're fortunate to be here in multifamily.
Yeah. I mean, even here at SalesMail, we've had to talk through the language that we're using because, there were some references to tenants and units, and it's all very nuanced. And what's important to realize is that it's not just words. It really has an emotional connection to the folks that are making the buying decisions. And if you're not speaking their language in the way that they want to hear it, you're going to have a tough time pushing that rock up that hill.
Absolutely. So I think like the first piece is just acknowledge that there's nuance, take time to learn it, grab advisors, talk to customers, talk to prospects. The second thing is the way that people buy software or buy technology in multifamily is also very different. And, I think that comes from a few different places, Steve. Like, one is the type of customer that we sell to typically doesn't have radical ownership. And you sell to a third party manager, they own a lot of the decision making, but they're still accountable to their client. And I think oftentimes we forget about the need to be a little bit more patient in the sales cycle, especially when you're introducing new technology that oftentimes isn't already in their budget. Many of us are selling something. I can assume SalesMail is in a similar category where we're not in a rip and replace environment where we're coming in to replace an existing software. It's the first time this customer has purchased. So the educational requirement to teach them how to buy, to teach them how to research, to teach them how to deploy so it can become successful, so the pilot can become a full portfolio partnership. There's so much nuance that so many people get wrong there.
Well, I think too, it's important to consider that you might also need to coach them on how to sell, because you're selling to them and then they're turning around and they're pitching this to their third-party owners, which is, there's a shit ton of third-party managers in the mix. And, to trust your product and you might have given the best demo or pitch in the world, but then it's left in their hands to take and to pitch up the chain of command with their ownership. And that's, that's a risk that you're taking to trust them to do that on their own. Have you ever kind of shepherded a client in helping them to pitch your solutions to their ownership groups?
Yeah, we call it a resell presentation. Well, that's like a good like lever. I think a lot of, great sales teams can control is like, hey, can I help you build that 2 or 3 slide presentation? Can I help you with the ROI or the proof of return that we're projecting out of this partnership, or how this aligns with the core focus areas for your business this year? Almost every, operator that we're working with right now is focusing on some sort of centralization motion, removing work from the site to put it into a centralized bucket, property admin, leasing, maintenance, etc. They're also figuring out how they can get the balance between expenses and revenue back in line, or they're thinking through how can we simply give our front lines more time to do less admin. And I think if we have an opportunity to like help be part of that conversation, even if it's just the prep, the probability of success probably goes from here to here just by us partnering together. But very verbose way to say yes. I deeply think we should participate in that process.
Yeah, and I don't think enough of us supplier partners have that mindset when we get on the phone with a client. We get excited that they're interested and they're gonna talk amongst themselves, and then it kind of disappears into the ether, and we wonder what in the world happened. And I think that's a big miss for many of us. I was thinking too about the fact that technology isn't always easy for the frontline people to embrace. What are some of the hurdles that you've seen with regard to like implementing a new solution? Because, people switch tech stacks, and anymore, it's not just, people aren't stacking anymore. It seems like they're looking more towards a best in class approach, and they're kind of cherry picking the things that, this company does this really well, and this company does that very well, and let's kind of do this piecemeal thing. So strategically, that's kind of a unique position to be in as well. What are your thoughts in those regards?
So I think a lot of companies in our space are obsessed with the pre-sale motion. They spend a lot of time in marketing, in sales, really top to bottom of funnel. But they spend next to no time on like crafting like a post-sale customer experience. And for 99.9% of technology companies in our space, they don't get paid until the deal is implemented.
Right.
So revenue doesn't come during the sales process. It comes in the customer experience that has to be crafted. That's training, that's implementation, that's customer success, maybe even account management, depending on how you're thinking about it. And I think it's wildly important, Steve. I mean, I think an example here would be understand how your early customers bought and implemented your product. What worked, what didn't, what was the best for both of you? How can you turn that into a machine, make that really predictable for both sides? But ultimately, I also think there's an opportunity to make sure that businesses are a little bit more specialized and a little bit less generalized, because I think there still are a lot of companies that are expecting the sales team to be the outbound, the sale, the implementation, the account management. Yep. That's not a sales team. That is not a sales team. Right. And I think that's a big thing that a lot of people get wrong as well.
Well, and I think that's probably contributed to a lot of the jumping that I've seen happening, where people have started in that specific road thinking that they had their lane pretty clearly defined. And then they get into the deal and they find that it's not the case, and that they are doing the things that, salespeople shouldn't be, managing the relationship once the sale's done. That handoff is so important. And I think from a supplier partner perspective, I've been on that side of the table for a couple, 3 years now. And I think a missed opportunity is that proactive approach to managing the customer experience versus, setting it and forgetting it and moving on to your next sale.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The other thing I've been thinking about a lot lately is trying to consume a lot of really rich content from like enterprise B2B marketers, because largely that is the environment that we're in on the technology side here. I think one observation that I see a lot of our peers in the space get wrong, more on the marketing side, but firmly in that go-to-market umbrella, is my belief with marketing is there's kind of two cogs. There's the work we need to do to create demand, and then there's the work we need to do to capture demand. And I think I see a lot of companies in our space spending almost all of their dollars, all of their energy trying to capture demand, cold emails that are crappily written, working conferences in a really unstructured, non-strategic way, doing paid advertisements without a lot of focus on who the ICP is, who's that ideal customer profile that's going to buy from you and stay for a long time. Yep. And on the inverse, they're doing very little on brand, things that are harder to measure, but you're right now embarking on that with this podcast. You're doing things that are harder to measure, but it's going to build an audience for your business up here that eventually, when the time is right, they're going to come into your funnel and you're going to capture them through mechanisms. And I think that is an early opportunity for companies if they want to stand out and pop for their investors, their people, their customers. Right. Balance your marketing approach and don't just be obsessed with capturing demand, because there's way more hearts and minds to go capture through building a brand and creating awareness versus the tactics that end up getting dumped on LinkedIn when people are annoyed during conference season.
Yeah. And I mean, it goes back to the relationship thing. And that is such an important and valuable commodity to have a solid relationship. And, that's why on this podcast, we don't talk about where I work very often, and if I bring it to the conversation, it's just very limited because the last thing I want to do is to turn this into some kind of a pitch that's going to turn my audience off. And my goal here is by bringing thought leaders like you to these conversations, I'm going to provide these folks in our listening audience with some exposure to folks that they probably wouldn't be listening to in their regular routine, and sharing ideas from folks who are thought leaders in the industry and building that thought. The bumper that you'll see coming into the episode talks about we're building this community of thought leadership for people who are owners or operators or folks who've got a heart for multifamily, because building that rapport and that relationship with people is so valuable here.
Absolutely. And the last thing on go to market that I've learned the hard way, Steve, is that the balance of how you sell is really important. Part of this does go back to relationship, but part of this comes into understanding how this industry functions. Like the lowest friction sale in multifamily is selling to an owner. An owner has direct control of the budget. They are able to make decisions, and sometimes they're willing to frustrate or, piss off, to use stronger language, their management companies if they've got conviction that we got to do this thing, right? Yeah. But we got to play the long game. Doing that as a technology company is only going to burn bridges with the management companies. And management companies control a lot of the positioning. They control a lot of the operation. They are massively important when it comes to the mind share realm. And so I think it's really important to have a patient and thoughtful approach to how you work with owners versus third-party managers versus, of course, the coveted vertically integrated owner operator that's typically a little bit easier to get in with and to make decisions with. But I do think it's important to have a nuanced approach in how you work with those three types of businesses. And if you don't do that the right way, I think you run a big risk from a business standpoint long-term to kind of get blacklisted. And I've seen companies, literally go bankrupt because their go-to-market thesis was owners only, and it did not scale.
Yep. Yeah. So in that same regard, Mike, you talked a little bit about, the trade show element and, how we show up at trade shows as supplier partners. What are some things you could recommend to folks that are listening in terms of, go-to-market strategy in how, I remember I think it was OpTech where we had a quick conversation and you were like, yeah, we got 22 meetings today. And, you go into those conferences in a very thoughtful way. That's different, I think, based on what I've seen and how you show up. It felt like it was very different than what a typical pre-conference email blasts and just hoping people stop by your booth. I mean, you were locked and loaded with an agenda full of people who actually showed up. I would bet you money 90% of the people that said they'd meet with you actually met with you. So what are some recommends that you could make? Because we are kind of starting to ramp up into conference season. Some recommends that would help those listening that are on the supplier partner side to maybe be a little bit more effective this coming year with regard to, who shows up at the conferences for them.
Absolutely. I mean, I think if we start with the elephant in the room, most companies in the space, north of 50% of their marketing budget is most likely allocated towards trade shows, conferences, or events at either the national, regional, or local level. And for many, that could be a $500,000, $1 million or much more. And the pay to play mentality has gone up. It's not gone backwards. It's very expensive now to participate in these events. So as a technology company, if you don't have proof that these events or experiences are bringing you value, first and foremost, I would encourage you to challenge A, should I be there? Or B, do we have the right approach for maximizing these events? That's the first period statement. Yeah. The second thing is that, you think about the ways in which you can get in front of a prospective buyer at scale. There are very few opportunities in a selling environment that match a conference where people's guards are down. They're there to network. They're there to explore. But they're also professionals that are coming in with an agenda. So I think what's most important for me is upfront qualification. work the list, but don't do 12 touches. Do 1 or 2 meaningful touches to that list. Personalize those. Don't spray and pray those, and qualify if your business might be on the agenda for what they're looking to experience this year. Share a couple of reasons why customers that are their size partner with you today, things that you could bring to the table and things you'd hope to learn from that conversation. And don't wait for people to come to the booth. For me, a conference is only successful if we come in with set appointments, ideally some that are on the trade show floor, but many that revolve around a coffee, an experience, a meal, or a cocktail. And those are also the highest probability meetings of show rates, like you said, and conversion to pipeline. And without those things, we're not going back next year. We just aren't, because we're accountable to the P&L.
Yeah. How much time on the front end do you spend kind of doing your due diligence when you're getting ready to reach out to companies? Are you getting to know their business prior to that initial outreach, or how does that work for you?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things right now that's like a massive pain point, I think any of the conferences could invest a few dollars and even charge more to vendors, is most lists don't come to us as participants scrubbed. They don't come to us with any information that's meaningful. We can't even see if this is a vendor or an owner, operator, owner, developer, et cetera. So the first thing we invest a ton of time into is scrubbing the list. We remove vendors. We insert the type of portfolio, the unit counts, if it's a customer or a prospect. We grab emails from either ALN or Zoom Info. We enrich the heck out of that list first, because without that, we can't segment it. So the first thing we do is always scrub the list. The second thing we do is we break it out by sales territory. We've got 14 sellers on our team today. So everyone has a crack to go work that list for their respective region, even if they know they're not going to attend, because they're the most relevant person to reach out. And then the second thing is, just like cold prospecting, you can't mess up that first touch. If you biff that first touch, you really run a risk for the long term. So yes, like definitely coach and direct the team to research, personalize, have a reason to reach out. If you don't have a reason to reach out, the likelihood of that email getting opened or engaged with is low probability.
For sure. That was kind of the approach that I've taken it at a couple of different supplier partners that I've worked for. And it's setting that relationship. I think you and I've used the term pitch slap.
Oh yeah.
When somebody connects with you on LinkedIn and the very first message you ever hear from them is a pitch that they want to spend time with you on their calendar. Yep. And they don't even know I'm not even an operator anymore, So do your due diligence. I think that's a huge important piece that doesn't get enough attention on the front end. I agree. I also see you out a lot. I'm sure your family sometimes wonders, where in the world is dad? Because you are in the field quite a bit. Your posts are out there. You're hitting the road early. You're working hard. How important is it for somebody you're in a pretty significant seat as a chief financial officer for a company? How important is it for you to be seen and to be out there mixing and mingling, boots on the ground?
I personally think the ground game is a massive competitive advantage in 2024. I think a lot of companies realized some cost saving benefits during COVID, cut back on T&E, and they did not reinvest in T&E from a budget standpoint. And if I reflect both kind of it, like the past couple of years of growing a business and transacting it, but also just like what's helped our business, separate from competition, grow fast at a 100+% year-over-year rate now for 4 full years in a row. The ground game has been incredibly important. And I really believe that if you're in go-to-market, whether that's marketing, sales, CS, even operations, you should be able to align yourself to like either finding pipeline, accelerating pipeline, or closing pipeline. Like your role should align to one of those 3 things. Yep. And real estate is largely a hands-on business. Most of our customers are in office, and we are not a priority. Their residents are, their developments are, their crises are. And what I've really found is that to break through the noise, to stand out, to maximize that probability of turning a conversation into a hopeful, selling opportunity, being in person early and often during the sales process, as well as the post-sale process. Yes, it comes at an expense, but both to family and to cost. Wildly worth it, Steve.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something to think about, because as you budget for your T&E for this year and for next year, did you consider making sure? I mean, even here at Sales Mail, Tara's out there. She's in the field. She's doing sales mails from properties when she's visiting with, the boots on the ground at the leasing office. Yep. And I think that says a lot for, how you feel about this industry, and how you feel about this industry is important to those folks who are making those buying decisions. Because, if you have a passion for what we do in multifamily, then it has to come through very clearly to your client, because obviously they have a passion for it, or they wouldn't be where they are.
Absolutely. People buy from people. And at the end of the day, one of the things I've learned on like the human nature spectrum, this is kind of a Mikeism, people appreciate efforting. And when they can see the effort, there is a human chord that is struck. And talk about, the opportunity to have a higher probability of getting a yes by driving or flying into that market, doing a customized drop off with a business card, not soliciting at all, and then hoping, but betting that that's going to turn into a conversation.
Yep.
And those are like the little things, like even for field reps that don't have a big T&E budget today, have you gone and knocked on all of the PMC doors within 100 miles of your office? Yep. If you haven't, that is total white space. And I hope your competitors are doing it today. And that's just the kind of stuff that like you can totally control that in this selling and also buying environment.
Yeah. How much of what you knew before you came into multifamily are you using now? Because I mean, you were working for some pretty amazing companies, had some great roles, and I just want to, how does that parlay into what you've been able to do with Rent Dynamics and other places that you've been in the multifamily space?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, this is my 10th year on the technology side of multifamily.
I believe it's been 10 years.
It's been wild. It's wild to think about that you were one of the people I've met in that like early chapter at G5. I spent 6 beautiful, complex years at Nike before coming to multifamily. But to answer your question, Steve, I'd say about 90% of the playbook I run today has been assembled over the last 10 years since joining multifamily. But there are 2 marquee things from Nike that I certainly apply today in my role as a sales leader and a business operator. The first is storytelling. I got to consume world-class storytelling from some of the absolute best in business. Phil Knight, Mark Parker. I got to meet, Kobe Bryant, Lance Armstrong, wow, LeBron James. And I got to see what it looks like to be compelling and bendy with words. And that certainly transcends into the modern business arena that you and I both sit in.
For sure.
And the second thing is I got very durable to change. I worked for Nike, I survived 4 layoffs and RIFs. My wife was actually laid off during one of those, which changed our life in a very positive way. But ultimately, I think I brought in storytelling and durability to change, which I think is more of a leadership attribute I use today. But ultimately, this has been built after the last 10 plus years in the space.
Yeah. Great. I love this whole storytelling. That could be a whole episode on its own.
It could be.
How to be a great storyteller. Epic stories make epic success, right? So if you can still hear me, I'm having a little bit of issue on this end, but I love that we captured that piece around storytelling. And I wanted to just parlay for a minute over to the personal side, because I know you're a husband, you're a father, you're on the road quite a bit. What are some recommends that you can make to help people ensure that they're paying enough attention to the peeps back home while still being effective in their role as a supplier partner?
So there are probably 3 things that like immediately come to mind. One thing that is really important to me, this is compounded over time, getting married, now being a father to 2 kids, a leader over a pretty sizable team, is I commit to everyone to be where my feet are. And what I mean by that is when I am at work, I am a hell yeah to work. And when I am home, my phone, I try to keep that thing off, and I'm a hell yeah to my kids or to my wife. And when I'm on the road, I'm crushing it. And I really try to bring my whole self. And that probably parlays into the second thing is like, if it's not a hell yeah, it should be a hell no. And we all know when we're too over leveraged. We've gone too hard on travel and we're neglecting the things that matter at home, or we've been a little bit tuned out at work and we got to like retune it up. And I think just that heck yes or heck no mentality really helps drive more authenticity. That was the word of the year last year, I think, for a reason, but it also makes sure that people around us feel us. And I think that really matters. And the third thing is like, ask for feedback. Like, you got to ask for feedback from your team, from your managers, from your spouse, your partner, your kids. Like, are you seeing enough of me? Are you getting enough of me? Those kinds of things. We are in a world right now where we feel like we have to be everywhere. The digital devices destroy, I think, our mental health. So check in with yourself, check in with the people matter most, and ask for direct honesty. And I think a lot of good things come from those conversations.
Great recommends. I love that you be where your feet are. That's important. And to be locked and loaded, no matter where you might be, wherever your feet find you, you need to be present in that place for sure. I had one last question for you, my friend, because this podcast is, we want to start a new vernacular, is the word audacious. And it's defined as extremely brave, daring, to be like an audacious explorer. From your perspective, Mike, what is your most audacious take in multifamily? It could be a trend you're seeing, something you're predicting, but what is your most audacious multifamily take right now?
My most audacious multifamily take would probably be one that's more directed at people's careers. I believe that the best growth comes from doing things that you're not quite ready for, or things that make you feel wildly uncomfortable. And I think there's a lot of people in our space that have been doing the same thing for a really long time. And I think that sea of complacency can drive a little bit of a complacency in the pace that our industry moves. And I think there are a lot of movers and shakers right now in multifamily that are embracing speed or saying yes to that role that they're not quite ready for, but they're going to go for it. So I would say my audacious take would be like, take a crack this year, put yourself on the market if you need something new, or ask for that promotion, or sign up for that initiative. Or if you want to be a better public speaker, ask your boss if you can run the next town hall for your company. Like, this should be the year of going for it, because the best things come from saying yes.
I love it. When I moved to a new city one time, I decided I was going to say yes to everything for a year, because otherwise I would just be holed up in my home and not make the connections that mean so much to creating that sense of community. And I love, to be audacious means to take risks. And, hopefully if our listeners are out there are thinking about that, you have to be in a position where you can take a risk, because sometimes you take a risk and it doesn't end up, working out or being what you thought it was. But sometimes you take a risk and it turns out to be one of the best things that you could have ever done for yourself, for your family, for your career. So I love that audacious take. We had Gary Gregory on the episode a couple of days ago, and he talks about, you own your career, you own your leadership development. Nobody else, it's not going to come to you. You have to ask for it and go find it. So I love that you're encouraging our folks to listen to those opportunities, and when it knocks a couple of times, it might be time to open the door and say yes to the dress, right?
That's right. Love it.
All right, my friend. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Mike. This has been a great conversation. Always a pleasure spending time with you. I look forward to seeing you out and about, hopefully. I'm excited for whatever your next chapter is. I know whatever it is and wherever you land, one, they're going to be lucky to get you. And two, you're going to just knock the hell out of it, because that's just the way you roll.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you.
So thank you for joining me today on this episode of The Multifamily Mind, brought to you by Sales Mail. And we look forward to seeing you on our next episode. Thank you for joining us on this episode of The Multifamily Mind podcast, brought to you by Sales Mail, the easiest way to send personalized video via email, text, and CRM. To learn more, go to salesmail.com. And remember, always be audacious. Until next time, I'm Steve Wunch. Have a great week.